At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! You're king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Super NES Podcast, episode number 161. As always, your two regular co-hosts are here, Greg and Joe. And once again, we're honored to have a guest host with us again. Somebody who's been on the podcast in the past, although it's been a long time since his last appearance on here. We are very pleased to have back on the podcast Aaron Hickman, most notably known from Genesis Gems, along with some other previous podcasts in the past. So it's great to have you back on the podcast, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
So obviously the world's been up in arms with everything going on the last 2 years or whatnot. What have you been doing these days to keep yourself busy?
I actually wrote a whole soundtrack for a Commodore 64 game that should be coming out this year. It's called Ninja Carnage, and I was approached to write a soundtrack for this game, which was actually already completely coded and written. Just needed music. And so, yeah, I learned a piece of software I hadn't used before to work on Commodore 64 music, which I'd written some before, but this was really a crash course in getting that done, and then working with the coder over in France to implement the music into the game. But it was a lot of fun. Working on music for a ninja-themed game is just a blast because you can go so many different directions with it. And so it is kind of like a modern-day ninja-type thing, but it's sort of like you get some little text adventure elements, but it's also mixed with little quick-time events, almost Dragon's Lair style. And then little puzzles you solve, almost like a little bit like WarioWare type thing, where there's little events and things you have to do, but then there's text that scrolls across the screen and pictures. But it's a unique game. It's got a sense of humor. It's a little bit adult in the humor department, but it's going to be great, and it's going to be free to download. I think there might be a physical edition that comes out eventually, but yeah, he's already got it. It's going to come out in 7 different languages. It's crazy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's people who've been translating it to different languages. It's going to be multi-platform, so it's going to be on other 8-bit computers, but I specifically wrote the soundtrack for the Commodore 64, so I'm super hyped about that. So that's kind of been my deal lately, besides the podcasting, and also working on music with my band, which is myself and my drummer. We take the chiptune songs that I write and then turn them into full band performances. So I've gotten to pick up and do that again and do live streams and things. We're not quite at the point in real life where you can go out and play a bunch of clubs and stuff. Not quite at that point because of COVID. But I'm vaccinated. I'm feeling more comfortable about going out places. So
sure. Yeah.
I'm excited about that part and just getting out there again. But life is good. I guess the other major thing was, I've talked about this on a few podcasts, but I just recently got married. We eloped, went to Vegas, and it was really cool. We got married at a ghost town.
Oh, cool.
Which was it was epic. And it was a road trip vacation after that. So we went to California, we came back, but while we were in Vegas, I got to check out the Pinball Hall of Fame, which was just amazing. Yep. They have some.
Yeah, I'd love to go there.
They have a few locations too, and they just have one-of-a-kind machines there. You can check out. Pinball Circus is there, which if you've never seen that, it's I believe to be the only one of that one, and it's like a multi-tiered almost like pinball mixed with a Rube Goldberg machine. So check out some footage of Pinball Circus if you can. Otherwise, the only other thing of note is that my daughter wanted a Sega Saturn, and so it was her birthday, and I bought her a Sega Saturn, and she's like, "Well, what about the games?" And I said, "Well, Sega Saturn games are really like Super Nintendo games. They're really expensive right now." So I said, "Okay, I didn't tell her what I was going to get her, but I ended up getting one of those devices that lets you load up games on an SD card." Yeah, so that's been really fun. Her birthday happened recently, and we've really enjoyed, and the other kids too, just going through the Saturn library. That was... I feel like, you think of like the Super Nintendo had a lot of great 2D games and RPGs. I feel like the Sega Saturn actually carried on that legacy much more so than the PlayStation or the N64 did, because the Saturn was like a 2D powerhouse.
It was very good.
So
True, yeah.
So a lot of those games that we enjoyed on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, I felt like were carried on that you could check out on the Saturn. Because I feel like the Saturn did kind of lag a little bit behind in the 3D area, unless it was like Sega making the game and doing like an arcade port. But there was just also stuff that stayed in Japan. There were so many cool 2D games worth checking out. So yeah, long story short, that's me catching up with you guys. Don't want to go too long there. Sorry about that.
That's fine. You're perfectly fine. So yeah. I was just gonna say quickly that the Saturn had numerous problems. Problems, and I think one of the biggest ones is that, like the TurboGrafx, most of the best games stayed in Japan. So what we got here in the States was very, very limited. So, but so. Cool. That's very cool about the Commodore, because I had a Commodore 64 growing up, and that system just had like amazing sound.
Yes.
And I wanted, I know this is gonna be controversial, but I still say Sid beats Pokey any day of the week. So
I would agree with you, because here's here's something the Pokey can't do, which is one of its channels can't stay in tune. So there's some pitches. If you've ever listened to enough Pokey music, Atari 8-bit.
Yeah.
There, for some reason, it can't do certain pitches in tune. I don't remember why that is, but that's a definite advantage of the SID chip.
Yes. Yep. And there's some, also there were some composers for the Commodore 64, like Rob Hubert, who really could make that flagship sing. Just just some amazing soundtracks they did for the games they worked on.
Yeah, it would be like ports of arcade games, and then you get a completely different soundtrack, like Bionic Commando, but then it would sound amazing, and you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I don't mind so much, because it's almost like he heard the arcade version, or he took a tape recorder and heard it, and then he made his completely different version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Or if you ever... it's not a great game, but if you ever play Golden Axe on the Commodore 64, the music in that game is phenomenal, even if the gameplay suffers because it's Golden Axe on an 8-bit machine.
Yeah.
And they can only have you fight against one bad guy at a time, sort of deal.
Yeah.
Music's great.
Right. So, yeah, definitely. So, great. Well, glad to keep you busy. Glad that things are glad things are going well for you, like projects like whatnot. Yeah, because you've been actively working on music for several years now. But it sounds like you kind of stepped up a bit, so that's cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess I've done chiptune seriously in video game music. I've done music for video games, but really hit it hard within the last 5 years, I'd say. And picked up some more steam. So yeah, I'm really excited about whatever's coming next. I can't say like the things we do that we love that are our hobbies. I'm not gonna say it's like, oh, this is gonna replace my main job or anything, but I just love that I'm able to do it in the first place. So it's it's really just like doing podcasts. It's about the love and the passion and the fans.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Cool. Well, yeah. So I reached out to Aaron, because because I was trying to learn some co-hosts, and Aaron always Aaron always picks the very obscure and weird games for us to cover in the podcast.
Yes, this is a retro obscura type game for sure.
Yes, he definitely delivered again, like this one. So I never heard this game before, so this was interesting to check out. What games do you want us to examine and shed some light on here, Aaron?
This is Mohawk and Headphone Jack. I believe developed by, I forget the name of the studio, but it's published by Black Pearl, which is like a division of THQ. But yeah, it's Mohawk and Headphone Jack.
Yep, exactly. So the developer for this game was a company called Solid Software,
Yes.
which is part of, which also worked on some of the Busby games. So that's their like heritage. So and Black Pearl / THQ we've already covered in past podcasts. I will not spend too much time talking about them like right now. This was a late Super NES game.
Yeah.
This got released in North America in August of '96. It did not come out in Europe until March of 1997. Did not get a Japanese release as far as I could tell. So it was a US and European game only. So, and the game title is apparently people couldn't decide how to spell the game title because in some places Mohawk spelled one word and Mohawk spelled two words. So there's no consistency with that. They could not agree, I guess, on how how it's supposed to be spelled.
I couldn't even agree on whether the Headphone Jack was referring to the second player or whether it was just talking about Mohawk's, Walkman and the headphone jack on it. But apparently, according to the manual, Headphone Jack is player 2, who is literally just a reskin of player 1.
Right. Yep. This game is either single player or multiplayer, but multiplayer. But it's not like true multiplayer.
No,
it's like alternating multiplayer, which was common for games of this time.
Yeah.
So, an industry veteran, D. Scott Williamson, did most of the work and design for this game, which
It's incredible. The stuff he was able to accomplish just coding wise.
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. So,
Yeah, I would say just in terms of like the speed in which this game runs, there's a little bit of slowdown sometimes, but it's just like the speed and also the way this is literally mode 7 the game. The way this game moves is just crazy because you go a million different ways. The screen spins, and it's not up to you. The game spins when it wants to spin, and it's programmed that way. But there's just some crazy ideas that were implemented into this game that I think that particular programmer, he was the main guy it was his concept and idea to program it. So my hat's off to him in that regard.
Plus, also the fact this was '96.
Yeah.
And by then people knew how to get the best out of the hardware. So
I agree. But I still can't think of any other Super Nintendo games. We might touch on this more, but like where you would hit select and you would actually zoom out, and then you'd get a map of the game. And it was real time. It would just zoom you out, and then you could scroll around a map. I only remember doing stuff like that in like a PlayStation game. So it was kind of crazy that you could just look around the entire level as a giant bitmap, and then hit select again.
Well,
and
I'm
it
an
would zoom
idiot
you
because I
right
didn't
back
even
in.
know you could do that. That probably would have helped me.
It's almost a must in this game to use that feature, and I can understand if you got lost. It's like because to be honest,
It took
I
me
got
45
lost
minutes
too,
to complete
where
the
it's like
first
you might be-
level.
You are not alone. I think if they would have actually focus tested this game, they would have realized that, oh, hey, maybe we should make it easier to complete a level.
Also, the fact the manual is not that helpful.
No.
So if you had looked at the manual, I don't know how much you would glean from that versus like just.
I would have
trial and
known
error and
select
just
was a
brute
map.
force, so don't feel
I
bad.
don't think that. Yeah. I don't think the manual tells you. I don't remember if I read it.
It doesn't.
Specifically tell you like, oh, hey, you need to collect, this amount of, and it's different on different levels. Like the amount of CDs you have to collect to.
It tells you you need to collect CDs. It doesn't tell you how many that you need.
It can vary depending on the level. And then it's like
right.
Some levels, like, this is 7 worlds, right? And each one has 2 levels. And the first level, it's like you have to collect a certain number of CDs in order for you to open up the exit to the level. But the thing is, when you get to level 2, the CDs suddenly don't really matter all that much. All they do is, I think if you collect enough of them, they show you where the boss is on the map. And that's literally it. You don't have to collect them at all if you don't want to. There's really no point. I don't even think they might boost your score a little bit, but there's really no point.
Yeah. So Aaron, like, we know about your love, different and obscure games.
Spelunker, that's a slept-on game. I feel like.
Yeah. Well, not to get like a target here, but I kind of agree with you. Spelunker's difficult, but it's not a bad game, I think.
I feel a similar way about this game, where it's one of those games where it's like it's almost tailor-made for people to hate it.
So how'd you first how'd you first hear about this game?
I got this game confused with 2 other big 90s Tude games when I was a kid, because I remember reading about it but never playing it until emulation. So there must have been some ad for it somewhere, and what I recall was confusing it in my head with games like Tempo, which was starring another character who I think had some sort of sunglasses, and then Johnny Bazooka Tone, which was a game on the 32-bit consoles, and was another thing where it was just like this character with so much 90s tude that I just kind of blended it all together in my head. So that was my exposure to this game. Was I would read stuff like Electronic Gaming Monthly religiously, and then my friends had Game Pro and Next Generation, that sort of thing. So I remember seeing at least screenshots of this game, but I never saw it in motion until later. And I feel like this was just doomed to obscurity, and part of it is that I think it really has to do with the look of the main character is just not appealing. It's not. I mean, it's just like it's a guy who looks like a piece of, I don't know, yellow Play-Doh.
There was one comment from a reviewer of the game who criticized Mohawk for looking like a naked man with no genitals.
Yeah. He looks like the Oscar guy, just with a little more mustard color, like the Oscar Awards guy. Or Pepsi Man, almost. He's just got this solid color, like, what is he? And that's what my kids were asking. He's like, my son was actually getting into the game, but he's like, what is this character? My daughter was like, is this like a Sonic ripoff? Like, what's going on here? Which is what it was.
It does seem like they're trying to say that the Super NES could do a fast-paced game like Sonic in some ways.
I mean, Super Nintendo had already proven by that point that it could. If you ever played like Sparkster, there are
another game I've never heard of. So okay.
Well, it's you ever played Rocket Knight Adventures?
Yes, that one I have played.
Okay, so Sparkster was the sequel. Released on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, but it's two different games that were loosely related. So the Super Nintendo one has some like really fast stages without slowdown, but then there was also stuff like Uniracers that proved that Super Nintendo could do like really fast-paced stuff without slowdown.
Right. Yeah.
So this is almost like I can't think of many other games that really tried for the Sonic the Hedgehog speed and movement like this game. I give this game credit for that, because there's not really other Super Nintendo games that did it quite like this.
Yep, I do too, definitely. So I definitely agree with you what you said, Aaron, about this game like being obscure. I think
Just doomed to
I think
obscurity.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 reasons for it. 1, the late release, because by '96 the Super NES was on the way out. 2, platformers by this point I kind of think we're kind of going out anyway, except that at least like at least like 2D platformers. It's like platformers are still popular, but I think I think more attention was being paid to 3D platformers like the PlayStation trying to do like a whatnot.
Yeah, unless you had like silicone graphics and you had you had those graphical workstations and you were pumping out rendered 3D pre-rendered graphics on the Super Nintendo. I think most kids were already moving on. I mean, you had like Donkey Kong Country 3 by this point, I want to say. And then I think the only other like 2D games right around this time might have been maybe Kirby. Well, Kirby's
maybe
Adventure
Kirby
3 was 96 or 97.
Maybe Super Mario RPG, which is kind of like more like 2.5 as far as graphics go. So so and also the third reason is like just the graphics. Because as you already mentioned, the graphics are really the defining feature like about this game. Because it's like you mentioned before, like about the Sonic, the Sonic speed, like and whatnot. But oh man, the rotating of this game. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, this was long before you had something like before you had Super Mario Galaxy.
Your rotation in this game made me sick.
Let me just say that. Let me just say that I'm pretty much immune to getting motion sick with games. This is actually one of the few games that actually did make me motion sick.
Yep.
So, and that's saying a lot.
I am just a glutton for punishment because it doesn't affect me that much. But yeah, I can definitely understand where you guys are coming from. So Joe, tell me more about that. Like when you first played this, because it sounds like
I was coming into it blind. So. When we had the list of games to pick from, I'm sitting there looking at everything and trying, like, a couple I do, and this one just kind of stuck out. Like, I had never heard of it, and I was like, okay, this could be something kind of cool, so I was like, let's go with it. Like, didn't know anything about it. So, I start the game up, and I see my little dude, and I didn't watch any videos or anything like that, so literally going in blind. And I'm like, okay, obviously I gotta grab the CDs, so I start picking up the CDs, and everything was fine to start off with. And then, I think the first time I noticed that I was going to have issues was when I picked up the wheel power-up. And I started picking up speed, and I wasn't quick enough to hit the spike ball, so therefore I was taking quite a few hits. And then... the rotation started, and then the rotation already when the rotation started, like I started getting like that small little migraine feeling already. Like I already knew I was in trouble.
That lurch,
and then on top of that, like that's only part of it. Then there's like arrows in the background that you think are just decoration. Like it didn't dawn on me what they did until I finally figured out, I jumped where like one of the arrows was and it switched gravity or whatever. And hello Yoda, sorry. Then things really got crazy because not only are you spinning at a high rapid speed, but also now you're like warping up and down at the same time.
Yes. And did you guys go to that bonus stage?
Yes.
That pops up at the beginning.
So I encountered some bonus stages.
The first couple CDs, a portal opened up, and I was like, "Oh, cool!" I was like, "This was short. Maybe it was just a tutorial to show kind of like what you're supposed to do." So I jumped in there, and then space. Space is not cool.
It's wild because there's gravity from like all different angles.
Kind of like what it is with space.
And so it's neat. Yeah, it does remind me of in Galaxy where you can kind of float around, and so yeah, the physics are real weird. When you're in the bonus level, you jump, and if you jump at the right angle and you keep moving forward, the game will actually make your character float, and you'll float further and further away from the little planet you're spinning around. And then that's how you'll collect the things that you're trying to collect. But it doesn't. The game has a supreme lack of text, or anything that you would see in this type of game, or at least I remember in these types of games sometimes where it'd be like, "Oh, here's an explanation of this thing," where you were kind of expected to just know, like, "Oh, I should just know that these yellow triangles are my health." Okay, that's great.
Yeah, like I said before, the manual does explain some of this, but doesn't explain like all of it like very well. So, and like don't forget your best friend, your best friend ever, like in a platformer game, instant kill spikes. So you run into those, and so
I encountered that in level 2. Not cool.
Makes it 10 times worse.
It does, especially like when you pretty much have to use that map and be like, oh shoot, are there spikes around here? Am I going to turn because the perspective constantly shifts? You could be winding around a corner, and then suddenly the gravity drops, and you're falling down a chasm, and you don't realize that down that chasm, like, oh shoot, there's going to be spikes down there, because you were like, a minute ago, your perspective was completely different.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the rotating effect is so bad that there are a number of videos on YouTube where that actually has been like corrected and actually like taken out of the video that you can watch the game without actually suffering from the motion effect, sickness of it.
Hilarious to me.
But
I think that's great.
So because like on one side it's kind of too bad because the graphics themselves are very good. I mean, like, graphically speaking, this is a pleasing game. Except for the main character, of course, but the backgrounds are very nice.
Yeah, and some of his animations are pretty wild, to be honest. I kind of wish they were animations for a different character, but I think it's cool. Like his swimming is really oddly fluid, and then the way he has 2 different jumps, right? So he has like this one jump where it looks like his head is moving to the other side of his body, but because he's this weird morph creature thing, kind of looks like a I don't know, like a Chia Pet.
That's pretty good.
He's got Chia Pet hair and then a Play-Doh body, and and his head just kind of, when you do that leap that he does, and not like the regular or whatever it is, he does 2 different types of jumps. One's kind of like a little hurdle, but one's a leap, and it's so weird because his head sort of just like slides to the end of his body. Yeah,
it's a very like dog-like leap to me. So
yeah, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I get what you mean. Like, there are some pretty impressive graphical effects, and for the most part, things move at a pretty fast clip. I will say that this does have sort of the Bubsy syndrome, where the levels sort of blend together, because there's just the variety. There's different types of levels, but it doesn't have like the same inspired look as like a Sonic game does.
It was made by the same people that can be the Busby games. So that's not a shock.
It's not a shock, but yeah, like I think like you know what? If you're gonna do a platformer, the only game I can think of that really did that successfully, like where it started in a factory, was maybe the first Batman game on NES. Otherwise, I'm like, you know what?
Oh, okay,
Factories are kind of a boring place to start. Let's be honest. I mean, there's no like rhyme or reason in the story. The story is almost like, here's a little bit of a story, but even then, it's just like, it's on the party dude planet, and you're a party dude, and there's one bad dude who doesn't like partying, so he's gonna steal all the CDs and he's gonna spread them everywhere for some reason. and then you're gonna go to these 7 levels that have nothing to do with each other, and that's okay. And that's pretty much the story.
Yep, you're right.
And there's
exactly.
weird gravity on Party Dude Planet.
Yes. So, Joe, motion sickness issues aside, what do you think about the
there
overall
was a lot of
graphics and gameplay?
promise with this game. Like from the beginning.
Definitely.
Where you
100%.
can, select a 1 or 2 player game to where you're starting the game off. I'm actually not against the design of the character. Yes, he's kind of like Play-Doh-y and he moves a little weird. But, I mean, there's quite a bit of detail, and he's a good-sized sprite. I was actually kind of impressed by that. You're right. A factory level is very bland and boring, especially when a lot of it looks the same. Also...
And it's open world.
And then, on top of that, I don't know if it was because of the emulation or if that's how the game actually is with the cart. But, I started the game and there was no music until after I collected a giant CD. And then suddenly there was music. And the music was really good. But I found it very odd that, here's a game that's clearly designed around the music aspect because you're collecting CDs. And yet there was nothing, just nothing. It was a void when you first start out.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have that issue.
Yeah, I played on real hardware. I did get music. But the music system is kind of interesting, and I don't know if you wanted to touch on that, Greg. It's unique, I think.
Oh, yeah. The music of this game, the music of this game is very good. I think I like it a lot. It is very fitting for this game. It's very heavy rock style.
Yeah, and it's they came up with they came up with different fake bands for the game, and so you collect these big CDs, and it's the same song will keep playing level to level until you collect a big CD, and then you'll get another piece of music, and then when you get to a boss, you'll get music for them. And then I think that's cool. You unlock music as you go along, and then you've got new songs to check out and play. And you've got one band that honestly sounds like the Mortal Kombat theme in 5 different flavors. I'm I'm down for that. And then another one that's kind of a more 90s hard rock style. I'm oh, that's cool. So I dig the variety, and I thought it went well with the theme. I wasn't 100% on board with all of the samples they used, but especially because it was a game in 1996 on the Super Nintendo, you kind of have to wow me a little bit. But I would say it was fairly solid.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So we mentioned the bosses. So the boss fights are interesting. I think it's.
Oof.
I mean,
that first boss is straight out of Sonic 2. Let's be honest.
Yes, it is. So
it made me laugh.
I mean,
it made me laugh. I'm this is Dr. Robotnik with a smiley face.
Yeah. So I really didn't think most of the bosses were difficult. I think it's it was 10 times harder to get to the boss than actually beating the boss itself.
Yeah, it was okay, I'm on the boss level. I had to figure out where the boss is, and to do that, I have to find some teleporter that transports me halfway across the stage, and then I have to find another teleporter, and that can be very, very confusing, especially with the spike traps and all sorts of crazy stuff going on. So I'm with you. Once you get to the actual boss, it's more okay, let me turn into my spin dash hedgehog wannabe thing, my spiky ball, my spiky ball, and I will spam it at the boss. Otherwise, I can do this crazy attack on everything move with the X button, where it's just your character kind of he explodes basically and just flies into a million pieces towards the screen or away from the whatever. It's one of those types.
Yeah,
of
that's a special ability. He collects floating. Yeah, you have to collect three. You have to collect three floating balls to be able to do that. And that special attack allows you to be able to kill the enemies on the screen, which is very nice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's like I definitely agree with. Yes, I definitely agree with Joe. This game has a lot of promise. I mean, if they kept the Sonic style gameplay and presentation with the speed and the rush, and maybe even some of the vertical stuff, like the loop-de-loops and whatnot, the game would have been fine.
I think if they mixed it up, I think that would have been more palatable for people, which is just like, if you had a stage where it was sort of straight ahead, but it still had a big sense of speed, but maybe, save the crazy physics stuff for like every other level. Or I mean, how did Sonic do it, right? Like Sonic 1, like, okay, we're gonna have a spinny thing in this game, but we're gonna save it for the bonus stages.
Yeah, and Sonic was fine, like, of that. Like, I never got sick of Sonic.
On the balls, another example where the screen constantly rotates Mode 7 style.
Yes, On the Ball is another game that kind of makes me motion sick a bit.
Yeah, that one does a little better because it doesn't scroll as fast. And I think the key difference is it's kind of like a labyrinth-style game, right?
Sure, yeah.
But you have control of the perspective. In this game, you really don't.
No, because it's always moving on you, so... It's like, really, just like I don't know what you guys think, but my just a feeling of this game, like the other day, if I was asked to sum it up like one sentence, would be like, it's a tech demo.
Yep.
It really
just shows
is.
What the game,
it's like demo scene the game. Demo scene Mode 7. Like, here's what the Super Nintendo can do. Taken in that context, if it was a homebrew game, I'd be like, I'm all for this. This is great.
Yeah.
But they were charging like 60 bones for people to pony up and play this game.
Probably about that, yeah.
$50, $60 just to play this. I don't know if I could justify that. Like, I'm weirdly intrigued and horrified and fascinated playing this game. There are a lot of layers. I don't know, man. Like, the motion sickness, just the weird perspective switches and not knowing where you are in the level. But at the same time, it's like, there's this cool sense of finding secrets that I like. I like that there are places you can go where you can find hidden CDs, or you can get hidden health boosts or find hidden power-ups. I like that. I like the transformations that kind of remind me of Plock, or remind me of Yoshi's Island, where your guy kind of transforms a bit. Where it's like, oh, look, he's got a tire, or now he can... The best one by far was probably the ability to fly. I'm like, all right, I'm down for that.
Yeah. There's one also. I also didn't know this until I was until after I was done playing the game and doing. I moved on to the research phase of this, because this would also pissed me off big time. Like, if I'd known this playing the game. There are bonus stages you can unlock in every stage by finding like CDs. Yeah. So, in order to get the best ending of the game, you have to visit all the bonus stages.
I mean, that sounds kind of like a Sonic, like a carryover from Sonic, like get all the Chaos Emeralds.
That's terrible. No game should do that to you. It's not fair. It's like,
Yeah, I agree with you. Where it's just like, oh man, how aren't I already enough of a glutton for punishment from this game?
Yeah, exactly.
And if they made the bonus stages more fun, then I'd be like, cool, all right, I'm down for that.
Or easier to find some cases.
Or easier to find. I mean, they're not bad, but I mean, it wasn't like Sonic always had the best bonus stages, but...
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Well, Mario had some good ones too, but
yeah, you wanted those bonus stages to kind of break up the flow of the gameplay and offer you something different, or just a little break. So yeah, it was kind of interesting that, like, because I remember I didn't beat the game, but I watched the speed run of it on GDQ.
Yep, I was going to comment on that, because this game is weirdly popular with, like, speedrun for some reason. So,
well, one particular speedrunner, it was so popular with him, in fact, that he did that speedrun. Apparently, he had submitted it to Awesome Games Done Quick for years before they accepted it into their Awful Games block. And then during that stream, he mentioned that he was able to get in contact with the programmer of the game,
cool.
which is really cool. He got in contact with the programmer of the game, had a correspondence, was able to show him his speed runs, and the programmer sent him a beta copy of the game.
Awesome.
So he was able to check out some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, which I thought was fascinating, and then see a little bit more of the behind the scenes, and see what got left out. So I think it's a curio. It's definitely not for everyone, but I think it's cool that I had the same experience. Maybe not the same experience, but they did a speed run of The Mask, and I'd never played that game on Super Nintendo, but it's another one that goes really, really fast and doesn't have problems with shooting you from one side of the screen to the other, and has some incredible speed runs for it that are worth checking out, and really crazy animations and just really fluid. And another flawed game that I think is it's kind of like with movies. There's going to be these movies that we know are objectively not great, but it's hard for me to say, like, I know when a game is just bad and there's no redeeming value. This is at least interesting.
Yeah.
And there are those movies too that are like that, where it's like, okay, I know what they were trying to do here, and I can appreciate it.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely. So I agree with all that. I mean, by the way, it seems like the best. By the way, it seems like the best speedrun time I could find in this game was just short. It was short 28 minutes. So that's pretty good. I think an average gameplay would be about like an hour long, probably, to go through this game. Because there's like 14 worlds, 7 stages. I'm sorry, 7 worlds, 14 stages, like two stages like each world. So there is at least a password system. So like you could continue that way if you want to.
Yeah, it's
so
a
that
hard game, especially as you get going. Just like with the spike deaths and traps and things.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's crazy. And also, like, the way you die is kind of insane. He just kind of like turns into a puddle of goop, and his head just kind of plops off.
Yeah, this game would have definitely benefited from at least the checkpoint system. I appreciate that they gave you the option of like the password system, but I think some of the levels were just way too big, and a checkpoint system would have been fantastic. Just my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, even with the map, knowing
there is a checkpoint system.
Like, where to go.
There is a checkpoint system. Yeah, but the game doesn't do a good job of explaining it. But there are these big yellow balls that you can run past that I think turn into X's, and they are your checkpoints.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do remember I saw those and I never made the connection.
Well, it doesn't do a good job telling you, like many things in this game, where it's like you either have to read the manual or just kind of figure it out. So I don't blame you one bit for not necessarily knowing about that.
Yeah, it's like like in the end, besides this game being an interesting tech demo in some ways, it's just like there are a lot of interesting ideas and concepts that were being tried in this game. It just didn't like work. It's like just the way that all came together did not make for a very smooth, palatable game, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we've seen games like that, or games that really push the limits, but you still have to have a marketable game that can appeal to a wide audience. And then it's like you look at this game, you're just like, okay, who is the market audience for this game? Is it teenagers that were into like mascot platformers, kids? Like, because you read the manual and it reads like a manual for a kid's game, like stuff that kids would get into, but then you play the game, you're just like, okay, like this is really hard, and makes me also think that, like, Greg, I think you've told me in the past, was it your mom? Did she work or run a rental store?
She managed a video store.
Yeah, she managed a video store. So going back to that, there was this whole bygone era where games had to be hard because people would rent them and beat them, or they would buy them and just return them and get their money back. And so there was this big push that thankfully kind of went away. Like, I like really hard games as much as the next person, but there are some things I don't miss about, just games being punishingly unfair at points.
Oh yeah, sure. And also the fact those games are still around if you want to, like for example, like Dark Souls. So it's like so like you're the kind of gamer who wants that challenge. It's out there for you, believe me. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's like I think this game. Having said that, I don't think this game is a bad platformer. No. I played worse. I think if you're, I think you're somebody who enjoys platformers and very like weird oddball games, and doesn't and can tolerate playing it without getting sick. This is definitely a game worth checking out because I never heard of this game before, and I'm sure a lot of other people who have listened to this podcast have never heard of it either. So it's like shining some light on this game is a good thing, I think. Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the more people who check it out, the better. Just have your Dramamine ready. No, I think
it's actually not a bad idea. I should have done that.
Right? I think most people will be okay. But one thing that we didn't really touch on was the jumping physics are a little different than your average platformer. There's a little bit more of a float. It's a little bit faster than like jumping in a fight, like in a virtual fighter game, but not by much, because it's like he does a really floaty jump. But I almost wonder what it would be like with the jump physics of, say, Sonic. If you jumped faster, would that just make it even harder? Does the ability to jump slower make it easier to time some of these leaps onto platforms or away from, enemies? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Joe, do you have anything else that you want to say about this game?
No,
in closing, that Aaron and I haven't already touched on?
I really wanted to enjoy this game, and like I said, right?
Just, don't do drugs. I mean, this game is an acid trip, let's be honest, and like you can tell because like you start up the game and it looks like a literal acid
you're
trip.
Absolutely right. And like the motion sickness was probably the biggest thing for me. And I think if I was able to maybe have it on I probably should have hooked my computer up to the TV and played that way instead of sitting at my desk only 12 inches away from the screen and playing it. But getting lost and literally 45 minutes on just that first section really kind of killed the game for me. Like I saw the potential.
Yeah.
I was able to get the wheel power up. I was able to get the wings power up. So I got to experience at least that part of it. But when I finally collected enough CDs and that portal opened up and I was taken to the next level, or I should say the next section of the factory, I was very pleased to get to that new section, and then I was even happier when I beat that boss, because when I got to that boss, that was where I powered it off. I was like, I've seen enough. I can form an opinion. I was like, there's walkthroughs I can look online. I was like, I wanted to play. I really did. And when I saw a video of like the underwater level where he's swimming, and you're right, the animation there is fantastic. I really wish I could have experienced some of those levels, and I probably should have looked the passwords up so that I could, but it is what it is. Like that, what they say, first impressions are everything, and the first impression almost made me hurl. So
Could you imagine if this game was
right?
If this game was a first date? I think you'd survive the night. I remember I had a first date where the gal almost threw up on me. So
Oh Lord, yeah.
That's true.
Well, Joe, could have been worse. It could have been a timer.
That's true.
I am so glad there was no timer, because if there was a timer,
Oh, that would have been unplayable then.
it would have been unplayable. I am glad there was a map. I'm sad that Joe didn't get to experience that, because that part is actually pretty cool.
I didn't
And
know there was a map.
it's interesting that you can
Right.
rotate it as much as you want, or not at all, and then you can just look at the map, and then you see that, like, oh, okay, this is much more logical
that's
than
the
I
other
thought
thing
it was.
Sorry.
And
The other thing I wanted to touch on was
Yeah.
I really like that.
No, go ahead.
Again, this is like lost potential, but like you could hit the left and right shoulder button and kind of slightly rotate where you were
Yeah.
at. So it was
The
like,
lean,
but it didn't.
Oh yeah, yep.
and that could
Oh,
change
see, that I
gravity a
didn't
little
notice,
bit too.
But it was like, I don't know. It's like I felt like it was an unfinished part. Like, you know what I mean? Like they had an idea so that you could see a little more of what you were doing in that specific area, but it wasn't enough. You know what I mean? And then the other thing is not being able to pick up CDs when you're in your little spin ball was infuriating, because especially like that first section where like you got those little,
that was
like,
aggravating.
I called them the Twizzlers of Death, flip-flopping back and forth. Like that's the only way you can get through there, and like you're missing CDs, and I had to backtrack to go collect some and whatever else, but
Yeah, I can understand why you would do that, for like so you don't get sucked into a vortex when you're on the bonus stage, but I would much prefer being able to collect, and there's no logical reason. There's no logical reason for a lot of things in this game, but there's no logical reason why you shouldn't be able to pick up CDs. Come on, man, it's the 90s. I've got a Walkman strapped to my hip sack here, my skin sack. I can't tell what it is he's wearing there. He's, it's just like, come on. He should be able to pick up all the CDs his little heart desires.
Yes, yep, that's definitely true. So, but for sure. So, before we move on here to wrap things up, do either one of you have any final thoughts you want to say about the game itself before I talk about some other stuff here to finish the game up?
Brought to you by William S. Sessions. Winners don't use drugs.
No, I really want to know what this game's going for.
Well,
honesty.
I bet you the price has gone up. I bet.
It's not that bad, all things considered, probably because it is an obscure game. But we'll touch about that in just a moment. So, if you used this game at the time the game came out, were pretty average, middle of the road. Many of the people talking about next generation game players were so two of the big magazines that covered the game, and they mentioned the same pros and cons about the game that we already have touched on, with one exception, which I hadn't thought about before in the past, but now I think about it, he's right. One of the viewers mentioned that one of the problems of the game is the enemies are all very generic, bland, easy to kill guys, which. Yeah, it's true.
They are kind of secondary to the... It almost reminds me of Knuckles Chaotix, where the enemies are secondary to the design of the game. They are more there to fill space in the stage than to really do much more than obstruct your speed. Whereas, like, in the other Sonic games, the enemies were designed in much more interesting ways. So, yeah, I feel that.
So just to give some examples, Next Generation gave like 3 out of 5 stars. Game players gave 73 out of 100. 71 out of 100. A magazine called Total out of Germany gave it like 3 out of 6 stars. So yeah, like very middle average of the road, like views for this game. So, there is a kind of an Easter egg per se that if you want to, there's a secret message password that you can put in. To see secret messages if you want to. So, I don't know what the purpose of this is. It's just kind of like eye candy or just like something defined for bragging rights or whatever, but they are there.
I found something too.
So,
you might not know this. Yeah. Pause the game, and you can change the volume to 11.
I did not know that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So there's a Spinal Tap reference in this game, which I think is great. So they did have a sense of humor somewhere buried in here. So yeah, you can change the volume to 11. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. So I mentioned eBay. This game is relatively uncommon on eBay. I'm not shocked by that because the fact this was a late game release for the system, and also the fact that I probably didn't get a very big print run. So you can find the game on there, just you don't have a lot of copies to pick from. I found only 5 copies I sold recently in the last 9 days, with 4 copies of the game actually listed on there for sale like right now. So these prices include shipping. The prices are not that bad when you factor they're not bad. They're not that bad when you factor in the fact that this has to be like an uncommon game. I think they think that these prices are held down a little bit because the fact that it's kind of an obscure game per se. But anyway, these prices include shipping. Out of the 5 copies that sold recently, 3 of them are cart only. Those sold for $30, $35, and $48. And the CIB copies sold for $55 and $62. But both those copies are very bad shape physically. So there are a few copies of the game being sold right now, currently as of the time of recording this, that are in great shape, like the mint condition boxes and manuals. They're asking anywhere for $100 to $200 for those copies. So hey, I also saw a copy of the manual by itself in mint condition. Was sold recently for $40. So yeah, so it's like it's another example of like a game that's not that hard. Not that expensive in cart form, but if you wanted a great condition CIB copy, you got to pay for it.
I actually expected it to be higher, to be honest.
So anyway, yeah, it's like I think it would be if the game was popular, but I think the reason it's the reason it's so cheap is just because nobody cares about it. So
yeah, but
anyway. So yeah, definitely a very interesting flawed game. I guess that summary. So I guess that I guess that I would just use the same summary for the game that the reviewer for GamePro did back in the day when he said different yes, fun no. So I mean that's a little harsh. I did have some fun with this game.
Is this game describing my life? Wasted potential? Is it just wasted potential? Is that what's happening? No.
Could be, yeah. So I mean, yeah. So I never would have even played this game. Probably if Aaron hadn't brought it to our attention. So I do thank you for that at least, Aaron.
You're welcome.
So,
I think it's just crazy that a game came out well before Super Mario Galaxy did, that explored the running around the surface of a planet, with crazy gravity, which it makes me wonder, hey, well, this came out on a Nintendo platform. Did Nintendo ever see this game and go, hey, let's take that concept and blow it way, way up and make it more palatable?
Yeah, they could have. Who knows?
I can't think, if you guys can think of any other games that did the spinny around a thingy type gameplay, I can't think of many others that did quite like this.
I guess maybe depending upon how you define it, maybe some of the, maybe the kind of Mario franchise, because you are kind of spinning around as a ball on a world in those games.
Okay.
Maybe. So,
yeah, I getcha. There has to have been some games that definitely did the Mode 7 thing of oh, we're gonna rotate the stage, and I remember that in Castlevania 4 and I think Super Ghouls and Ghosts. So they played with
Activizer 1 and 2 used it a little bit.
They played with it.
Yeah. Power Wings, Power Wings and F-Zero for sure also used it. So
yeah. And then there was an indie game that messes with perspective shifting, but does it in a little bit more of a mannered way that's not quite so crazy as this. And that was it's called And Yet It Moves, which is an indie game from about 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah, but yeah, Aaron, just to follow up what you said earlier, as far as the actual spinning the game screen around on the ball is the only game I can think about that's it's closer to this. Yeah. But as far as the actual like game perspective goes, like of that. But even that game was tamer compared to this, because this game forces you to move.
Oh,
whereas on the ball, like really doesn't.
This game's very kinetic, and it's very fast, and yeah.
It is impressive to see Super NES like chugging along at like the speed though, like very little slowdown. So like I will give the programmers credit for that. The programmers knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was always the big knock. That was always the big knock on the Super NES. Like you couldn't do it couldn't do this isn't
Right.
couldn't do Sonic, Sonic style game. So
Yeah.
I think games like this kind of prove that it could be done. The right people were programming
And
for.
even if you never play this game, I recommend going and checking out. I think his name's PJ, but go check out the speed run of this game from Awesome Games Done Quick, which is amazing, and he unabashedly loves this game. And I love games like that where there is that one fan where they know it's like a notoriously unloved game, and they've kind of taken it under their wing and been like, but no, look, there's just so much more to this game than you realize, guys. You just have to give it a chance. I just love that quality, and it's just a hilarious speed run because he's joking the whole time because he like someone asks him like, hey, does the manual explain any of it? And he's like, no.
Nope.
It doesn't. It's like the game tells half a story and just kind of says, who cares?
Yep. And also, like I said before, like they have problems with that motion sickness. There are like there are shake corrected versions out there for you to watch. Like I posted one like in the Discord chat, Joe. If you want to watch that later on to actually like see the game.
Yeah,
and
actually,
without getting sick
while
from
we
it.
were talking, I actually had it playing in the background. That rotation though, it definitely is better, but that rotation is still killer. Yeah.
Really? Because I find that to be like much more palatable to me. So.
Oh, that's funny.
But
I wonder if you could get it like
because,
real-time emulation feature, then I think people would be down for that.
Yeah, so the only other two games, so the only other game I can think about off the top of my head that could cause motion sickness besides this game, like on the ball. Aaron, did you ever play? I don't remember the exact name. I don't remember the exact name they gave to it. The F-Zero game, like on the GameCube.
Oh, F-Zero GX or AX.
That one was like
AX in the arcade.
Yeah, whatever it was. That one with this upside down and loop courses. That gave me some motion sickness.
Yeah, that game is. I think that was the game. Where it's a great game, but they really couldn't go any further with F-Zero after that.
No, they couldn't.
That's what I felt like okay, they've reached the pinnacle of like what they can do in terms of barf bag speeds.
Which is a shame because it's a great game, and like I actually like it better than the 64 one. And I can say something.
That does.
It's just unfortunately the motion, and just unfortunately the motion sickness has to be plays a problem in some stages. So, but like Sega knew what they're doing in that game. I mean, like the gameplay, the remixed music. It's like the graphics are all top notch.
You know, if you could give medals and awards to games that actually made you motion sick, then I think that would be great. And I'd give this one a gold star ribbon or a. I don't know what to say. Like I think more games should push the boundaries. Maybe not make you sick, or if you have epilepsy, give you a seizure. But I think it's just really cool that something like this exists on the Super Nintendo in the first place.
Definitely.
I'm hard pressed to find a game on this system quite like this, or that reaches as far as this game does and doesn't quite grasp what it wants to do, but goodness, it just reaches for it.
Yeah. Nope. Yep, I definitely agree with that. So, but anyway, so thank you again for Aaron for coming on the podcast once again to talk about another obscure game, like very fitting for you and your patient. So,
and Sonic, it's Sonic worthy, so it's. It's almost Genesis Gems.
Yes. Speaking about that, do you have any podcast projects, et cetera, that you want to plug that you haven't already talked about earlier?
Okay, so we got Genesis Gems, which is the most current thing I do, and then I'm also on the Bit Brothers Network with Two Dudes and an S, our main rivals. For some reason, we're not rivals with the SNES podcast, guys.
Well, we need to join you,
right?
probably.
But we kind of do this thing with Two Dudes in an S where we will do a monthly roundup show every now and then. And that's sort of just shooting the breeze with friends and then catching up on games we've been playing. So, and answering questions from our listeners. So, sometimes sometimes you want to talk about the modern stuff. Sometimes it's retro. It just is kind of a grab bag of all that stuff. So there you go.
Okay, cool. Well, once again, Aaron, we appreciate you being on the podcast with us. We'll have to have you back in some point in the future. So, but yeah, so can always count on you to. Yeah, I can always count on you to bring some very interesting games to table for us to look at. You know, like I said, I never would have played this if it wasn't for you. So, if anything, this game's very interesting. So, thank you again for it. I appreciate it.
You know what? I'm just lining you up for more punishment. So the next time you want to have me on, I will just have to find the next punishing game.
Well,
no, I swear it's not all. I swear there are some Super Nintendo games I like that are not just there to torture you.
As I recall, not to throw anybody under the bus, I think Joe was one
out of the list
this,
that was given, I did pick this. To be fair.
Oh, that's right. I had a list of games. I don't remember all the ones that I said. Oh, you've got this one and this one, and I think that one looked the most interesting too. I'm just like, okay, let's go for that.
Yeah. So, but that's okay. But. Alrighty, Aaron, thank you again, as always, being on the podcast with us. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Joe, thank you again, as always, for joining me. Next time on the podcast, we're having another guest host, another person coming back to the podcast after a long hiatus. We're very pleased to once again have Phil, aka the No Swear Gamer, coming back on the podcast to talk about a game with us. In light of the recent Godzilla movie release, we're going to be covering Super Godzilla on the system. So, because he is a Godzilla fan just like I am, and just like Joe is too, I think. I think I've asked you about this already before, Joe, right? Okay, cool. So, so we'll have him on the podcast to talk about that game with us. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., feel free to either email them to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com, or you can also join us on Facebook and post your thoughts there. Finally, I want to give a very special shout out and special recognition to former co-host George. Even after George had to step down from podcast with me last year, he still agreed to edit the podcast for us. Last episode was the last episode that he edited for us. This episode is going to be the first one that somebody else is going to be editing for us. So I wanted to thank George again for all his time in the podcast, both as a listener, a co-host, and also for editing the podcast for us. And so thank you again for your appreciation, hard work, and time dedicated on the podcast. It means a lot to us. So. Thanks again as always, guys, and we'll catch you again next time. And one piece of advice: if you decide if you want to give this game a shot, don't eat first.
Oh, ain't it the truth?
All right, take care, all.
Later.
At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.